A man quietly mourning the loss of his beloved dog at the hands of reckless cops hides a deadly past they never saw coming. As secrets unravel and justice takes a thrilling, high-stakes turn, the streets tremble under the weight of a storm no one can stop. This isn't just revenge, it's a reckoning. If you thought you knew what was coming, think again. Hit that thumbs up, subscribe, and buckle up. This story is one for the legends. The street was quiet that morning, wrapped in a heavy silence that seemed too thick for a sunny neighborhood like North Point. Lawns were trimmed, driveways spotless, and birds chirped above the hum of distant leaf blowers. But at the corner of Cypress and Fifth, the air shifted, tightened. Elijah Kane stood barefoot on his front lawn, coffee in one hand, the other resting gently on the head of his Labrador, Bishop. The dog was calm, unmoving, his body pressed against Elijah's shin like a pillar. Elijah's eyes were fixed on a patrol car idling at the stop sign. The engine purred too long, too deliberately. He knew the look. He knew the stare. Windows tinted just enough to obscure the faces inside, but not enough to hide the shape of eyes watching, judging. "Easy," Elijah whispered down to Bishop. The dog's tail thumped once, then stopped. A few years ago, he might have brushed it off. Now, he measured everything. The angle of the car, the way the officer's hand lingered on the radio, how the second cop in the passenger seat leaned forward like he was waiting for something to pop off. The cruiser rolled forward, slow, too slow. Elijah took a sip of his coffee, and then it stopped. Doors opened. Two white officers stepped out, one tall and wiry, the other with the barrel chest of someone who used to play football and never let it go. Elijah's jaw clenched the moment they crossed onto his lawn without invitation. No words, no cause. "Morning," Elijah said, voice level. The wiry one pulled his sunglasses down. "Got a report of a suspicious vehicle parked on this block." Elijah glanced down at his driveway. His matte black 1970 Chevelle SS gleamed under the sun like a wet knife. "That's mine." "Yours," the football cop sneered. "You sure?" "I live here," Elijah replied. His voice was low but calm, calculated. "Everything all right, officers?" They didn't answer. The wiry one looked around like he was expecting someone else to walk out. The dog moved, shifting slightly between Elijah and the officers, sensing tension. "What's the dog's name?" football cop asked. Elijah raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "Just making sure you got a license for him." "He's registered." "Want me to get the papers?" "Nah," said the wiry one, stepping closer. "We'll take a look ourselves." And just like that, he reached for Bishop. Elijah moved. Not fast. Just enough to block his arm. "He doesn't like strangers touching him." "Is that a threat?" the football cop barked. "No. That's a warning." It happened so fast, Elijah almost didn't believe it. Football cop pulled his taser. The crackle filled the air. Elijah didn't flinch, but Bishop did. The dog lunged, not to attack, but to shield. To protect. The taser fired. Hit the dog. Bishop yelped. Loud. Raw. And dropped. Everything froze. The world tilted. The coffee cup slipped from Elijah's hand and shattered on the walkway. His breath caught in his throat as he dropped to his knees beside Bishop. "Why did you?" he whispered, but the words never fully came. The football cop still held the taser, now lowered. The wiry one's hand hovered near his sidearm. "You okay?" he asked, like the question mattered. Elijah didn't answer. Instead, he pressed his palm to the dog's chest. Bishop's breathing was shallow, eyes glassy. "You killed my dog," he said, his voice like a distant thunder, quiet, but promising a storm. "Sir, step away from the animal." Elijah stood up. The two cops shifted, suddenly less sure. "I'm only going to say this once," Elijah said. "Leave my property." "You threatening an officer?" football cop challenged. But Elijah just stared. That old fire, the one buried deep under years of quiet, crackled to life behind his eyes. They didn't recognize him. They didn't know the name Elijah Kane. Didn't know that he wasn't just some man with a clean lawn and a good dog. Didn't know that this man, the one who stood silent as they murdered his best friend, had led Black Ops teams through hell and back. that his name was spoken with reverence in secret rooms across the world, that he had ended wars before the public even knew they had begun. They didn't know, but they would, because they didn't just kill a dog. They woke a ghost. The emergency vet was 10 minutes away, but Elijah made it in 7. Bishop was still breathing, barely, lying in the back seat wrapped in his hoodie. Elijah didn't speak during the drive, didn't curse, didn't cry, but his knuckles were white around the steering wheel, and his eyes, normally calm, dark pools, were now volcanic. He parked crooked, didn't bother locking the Chevelle, and carried Bishop in his arms like a wounded soldier. The receptionist recognized the look on Elijah's face before she even saw the dog. Room 3. "We'll call Dr. Harding now," she said without asking questions. He laid Bishop down gently. His hand never left the dog's head. "Hang in there, Bishop," Elijah whispered. "You did good. You always do good." 15 minutes passed like an hour. Dr. Harding finally came in, calm but serious, her gloves already on. "He's in shock." The voltage was high, more than a standard civilian taser. "I need to stabilize him now." Elijah stepped back, jaw clenched so tight his molars ached. "Do whatever you have to." He didn't stay in the room. Not because he couldn't take it, but because if he didn't walk out, he would explode. He found himself outside, staring up at the sky. The sun was too bright, the breeze too soft. The world was still turning as if nothing had happened. He hated that. His mind flashed back, years back, to another dog. A Belgian Malinois named Rocco. A mission gone wrong. Blood in the sand. Men screaming over radio static. The price of loss. He shook the memory off, barely. A notification buzzed on his phone. It was from a neighborhood app. Black man with aggressive dog confronts police. Residents concerned. He stared at the screen. Aggressive? He scrolled. A video. Someone had filmed it. From across the street. Shaky and low-res, but the sound was clear. The dog didn't bark. Didn't bite. Just stood between him and 2 white officers who walked onto his lawn without a warrant, without a reason, and fired a weapon. The footage ended with Bishop hitting the ground. Elijah's fingers hovered over the share button, but he stopped. Not yet. Not until he knew the full extent of what had been done. His phone buzzed again. Unknown number. He picked up. "Yeah. Sir, this is Internal Affairs. We were informed of an incident involving Officer Daniels and Officer Monroe. We'd like you to come in and give a statement." He didn't respond immediately. "Elijah Kane," the voice prompted. "You want a statement?" Elijah said softly. "You'll get one, but not the kind you're expecting." He hung up. He had remained quiet for years. Retired with honors. Disappeared into civilian life. Bought a house. Mowed his lawn. Walked his dog. Now, they'd kicked open the wrong door. They just didn't know it yet. Later that night, Elijah sat in his garage, light dim, the air thick with gasoline, motor oil, and memories. He opened the black trunk in the far corner. Inside, sealed, pristine, was a military-grade duffel bag. He hadn't touched it in 5 years. His fingers slid over the old Delta patch. Dust clung to it like a forgotten memory. He opened it. Inside were tools that no civilian would legally possess. Custom block. Suppressed. Modified to his exact hand pressure. K-bar blade, still sharp. Encrypted phone, satellite only. But most important was the badge at the bottom. One that wasn't issued by any local force. It was black. Delta Force Black. The kind that didn't get questioned. The kind that made even FBI agents stand aside. Elijah stared at it for a moment, then closed his eyes. They hadn't just heard him. They'd started something they weren't ready for. Because when they killed Bishop, they didn't just break the law. They broke the seal on the wrong man's peace. The man who'd taken down cartels in Colombia. Who'd ghosted through bunkers in Syria. Who'd once disappeared an entire terror cell in under 6 hours, with no team and no trace. That man was back now. And he wasn't coming to talk. He was coming to teach a lesson. Starting with Officers Daniels and Monroe. Elijah didn't sleep that night. He sat at his kitchen table, lights off, blinds drawn, a single candle flickering in the dark. Bishop was still alive, stabilized at the clinic, but the vet made no promises. The words, "if he makes it through the night," played on repeat in his head. He let the silence sit with him, breathing through it, letting it soak in. Then he opened the small drawer under the table, pulled out an old, weathered notebook. Inside were pages of hand-drawn maps, names, numbers, his contingency journal. In the field, they called it the last word. If things ever went sideways and you needed to make noise without saying a word, this was it. He flipped to a blank page. With a black Sharpie, he wrote, "They came to my house. They crossed my line. Now I draw my own." He didn't need to list names. He had them memorized. Officer Brad Monroe, Officer Ethan Daniels. Both were part of the 27th Precinct. Monroe had a history of force complaints, 6 to be exact, all filed by Black or Latino men. None sustained. Daniels was newer, but had already earned a reputation in the neighborhood, cocky, quick to escalate, and always itching for control. They were cut from the same cloth. Elijah had seen their kind before, overseas, in interrogation rooms, in war zones. Men who thought authority meant immunity. Men who thought uniforms made them untouchable. But he wasn't the kind of man who took things to court. He was the kind of man who ended things. The next morning, Precinct 27. Officer Monroe was sipping his oversized coffee in the squad room when a sergeant walked in and muttered something to the captain. Quiet. Tense. Monroe didn't catch it. Didn't care. He was busy telling Daniels about how the dog jumped first. Daniels wasn't so sure anymore. His hands had been shaking all morning. Something about Kane's eyes haunted him. There wasn't fear in that man, just silence. Measured. Like he'd been doing math in his head. "You okay, rookie?" Monroe asked. "Yeah," Daniels muttered. "Just tired." Monroe smirked. "Don't go soft now. We did what we had to. You saw it." Daniels nodded, but something in him twisted. It didn't sit right. None of it. Then came the call. "Dispatch, be advised, we've got a break-in at 392 Cypress. Caller says they heard someone on the roof." Monroe froze mid-sip. "That's Kane's house," Daniels said, sitting up straighter. The captain waved them both off. "Go check it out. Probably just a raccoon." They rolled out, sirens off. Back at Kane's home. Elijah was already gone. The break-in report had been a decoy. He'd called it in using a voice modulator and an untraceable burner phone while he was already en route to the precinct. The timing was surgical. By the time Daniels and Monroe were pulling up to his house, he was stepping inside theirs. Not their real homes. Their base, Precinct 27. He knew every angle of the building. Blueprints had been in public records 5 years ago, before they updated the digital firewall. But Elijah had those backups. Stored. Archived. Ready. He slipped in through the garage bay. Changed uniform. He wore a black tactical jacket with a maintenance badge, a clipboard, and a fake ID that passed a glance. Nobody questioned him. He moved like he belonged. Straight through the side corridor. To the evidence room. 10 minutes later. Monroe and Daniels returned from a call, annoyed, muttering curses about prank calls. Daniels stopped walking halfway down the hall. "What's that smell?" Monroe sniffed. "Is that smoke?" The fire alarm hadn't gone off yet, but by the time they turned the corner, they saw it. Black haze pouring from under the evidence room door. Monroe rushed forward, yanked it open, and staggered back as smoke billowed out. Dozens of boxes were already reduced to ash. Digital logs were melting on a nearby screen. The room had been flash-burned with military-grade incendiaries, precise and controlled. Someone had just erased years of cover-ups and left behind a single message, spray-painted in red across the wall. The dog did nothing wrong. The precinct was in chaos. Fire trucks arrived too late to save the evidence room. Internal Affairs showed up within the hour. The captain screamed until his throat was raw, demanding to know how someone had walked into a secure facility, set a precise fire, and vanished without leaving a single trace. Daniels sat in the locker room, pale. Monroe paced, muttering curses under his breath. "This is terrorism," Monroe growled. He torched city property, You hear that? We could press federal charges." Daniels didn't answer. He just stared at his locker. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Unmarked. White. Clean. He reached for it with shaking hands, glanced around, then opened it. Just one line. "I know where you sleep." He dropped the paper like it burned. Across town, Elijah sat on the roof of a low-rise apartment, overlooking the city's veins. He moved like a shadow, quiet, precise, invisible. He didn't need to run. This wasn't panic. This was the hunt. And this was the recon phase. He knew they'd try to play victim. Spin the story. Make it look like he was the aggressor. That's how they always did it. That's how the system was built. But Elijah didn't play defense. He played decisive. He tapped on his encrypted phone, opened the app. An old friend's voice answered. "You calling in a favor?" the man asked. "I need background. Fast. Full surveillance logs. Internal reports. Social trails. Anything on Monroe and Daniels." The line paused. Then, "You serious? You said you were done." "I was," Elijah said. "They killed my dog." The man sighed. "I'll get it to you in 6 hours." "Make it 3. Click. 3 hours later, Elijah sat inside an abandoned mechanic's garage on the edge of town. The walls were rusted, but the power still worked. He opened the folder his friend had sent him digitally, now printed and sorted on the table. Brad Monroe, 42, prior military. Dishonorable discharge. Domestic complaints, sealed. Used connections to jump into law enforcement. 3 excessive force investigations closed due to lack of evidence. Ethan Daniels, 28, rookie. No military record. No major flags, yet. But his social feed was full of thin blue line propaganda and posts mocking soft citizens. One thing stood out. Daniels had a girlfriend. Young. Worked at a diner on 9th Street. Elijah noted the name. Angela. He wouldn't touch her. But she was the key. Later that night, 9th Street Diner. Angela was closing up when Elijah entered. He looked like any other man in a hoodie and jeans. Calm. Respectful. Sat at the counter and ordered a coffee. When she brought it over, he smiled. "You dating a cop?" She blinked. "Excuse me." "Ethan Daniels. He talks about you a lot." Her expression shifted, defensive. "Do I know you?" "No," Elijah said softly. "But I know him. And I know what he did. He killed my dog." She looked around, worried. "Okay, I don't know what this is." "I'm not here to hurt you," Elijah said. "I'm here to give you a chance to save him." "From what?" "From me." She froze. "I need him to understand something," Elijah continued. "What it feels like to lose what you love. What it feels like to be hunted, watched, to have the world close in and no one believe you." Angela's breath caught. He placed a burner phone on the counter. "Give this to him. When it rings, he needs to pick up." Then Elijah walked out. Back at the precinct, Daniels found the phone in Angela's purse. She told him everything, shaking. "You need to tell someone," she begged. "Call backup. Call the feds." But Daniels didn't. He knew deep down, no amount of backup would matter. When the phone rang, he answered. "Elijah Kane?" he asked. "You have 1 hour," Elijah said, "to come clean, publicly, about what you and Monroe did. Or I take this further. You know I can." The line went dead. Daniels was drenched in sweat. And for the first time in his life, he knew exactly what it felt like. To be afraid. Daniels sat alone in the squad car, parked in a dim corner of the station lot. Phone gripped in a trembling hand. Every few minutes, he looked over his shoulder like he expected Elijah Kane to appear behind him. Silent, sudden, merciless. He thought about calling internal affairs. He thought about confessing. He thought about running. But most of all, he thought about that look in Elijah's eyes. Not rage. Not grief. Like a man who'd ended lives not out of hate, but out of necessity. A man trained not to scream, but to finish. He checked the time. 43 minutes left. Across town. Monroe wasn't worried. He was furious. "This is war," he growled, slamming a beer bottle onto the bar counter. We let this slide. Every punk with a chip on his shoulder thinks he can torch a precinct and threaten us. His buddy at the bar, an off-duty detective, nodded but kept quiet. Monroe was pacing now. You know how many dogs I put down? They all bite someone eventually. This one just took too long. Behind him, a figure walked past the window. A shadow. Too smooth to be a drunk passerby. Too slow to be ignored. Monroe froze. He stepped out of the bar, hand instinctively on his sidearm. But the street was empty. He turned back, then saw it. Taped to his windshield. A single photograph. It was his wife. And his 2 sons. In their backyard. Yesterday. Taken from a distance. Through a scope. He snatched the photo, heart hammering. On the back was one word. Now you get it. Daniels, 30 minutes later. He was pacing the alley behind the station now, trying to convince himself to walk back in, to say something, anything. Then the burner phone rang again. He answered before the first ring ended. Please, he said. I didn't mean to hurt the dog. I thought it was charging. You didn't think, Elijah said coldly. You reacted. Like you were taught. Shoot first. Explain later. I can help, Daniel stammered. What do you want? What's the point of this? The point, Elijah said, is that you start to understand. Because the system will protect you. The badge will shield you. But I will not. Daniels nearly dropped the phone. Elijah continued. You have 15 minutes left. Go live. Confess. Or I won't just burn your files. I'll burn your life. The line went dead. 15 minutes later, Daniels' apartment. Angela watched in shock as Daniels went live on social media. His hands shook, face pale. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat next to him. I need to tell the truth, he began. About what happened on Rosewood Street. About the dog. And the man we tried to frame. He paused, looked into the camera, and spoke. Everything. The forced report. The planted line about aggression. The lie they told to the captain. The moment Monroe laughed afterward and said, that dog was lucky I didn't shoot the owner. Angela sat frozen. The comments exploded. Monroe's house, same night. A brick shattered through his front window. Sirens screamed as neighbors called 911. Protesters were already gathering outside, screaming his name. Someone had leaked the address. And now there were lights, phones, chants. He opened the front door to scream at them, but stopped cold. On his doorstep was a box. Small, black, taped shut. Cautiously he opened it. Inside was his own badge. Burned, warped, melted down. Underneath was a photo of Bishop, the dog, still recovering at the vet. Bandaged, but alive. And a note. You took what I love. I let yours live. That's the difference between us. Elsewhere, a rooftop over the city. Elijah stood in the wind, staring out across the skyline. His mission wasn't revenge. It was revelation. Expose them. Shake them. Force them to feel. Bishop would recover. The vet had called earlier, amazed. He's fighting like a soldier, she'd said. Elijah smiled faintly at that. Because that's exactly what Bishop was. And so was he. Only now they knew. The system had tried to bury him. But now it knew the truth. You don't kill a warrior's peace and expect silence. The city was shifting. Daniel's confession went viral in less than an hour. News anchors scrambled to verify details. Commentators debated whether he was coerced. The police union called it a betrayal. But the people heard him. They saw a cop admit what many had long suspected, that the system covered its own. And behind it all was a shadowy name, whispered across forums and message boards. Elijah Kane, Precinct 27, the next morning. The mood was toxic. Daniels was suspended pending an internal review. Officers wouldn't speak to him. They wouldn't look at him. He sat in an empty hallway like a ghost, head in his hands. He thought confessing would free him. It didn't. It just made him a target. Monroe, meanwhile, had been pulled from street duty, under investigation for falsifying reports. But he wasn't panicking. He was furious. This Kane guy thinks he's untouchable, Monroe said, pacing the captain's office. Let me bring him in. The captain, a veteran of the game, shook his head. This isn't some junkie with a grudge. This is a man who infiltrated a precinct, burned evidence, and vanished. You don't hunt that. You wait. You make him slip. Monroe clenched his fists. He's already slipped. He went after my family. The captain didn't blink. Then maybe you shouldn't have gone after his dog. Meanwhile, Elijah's safe house. Elijah sat in a dark room lit only by a soft lamp. Across the table sat a woman, sharp eyes, short hair, a scar down her neck. Captain Nadira Quinn, ex-Delta, long retired. One of the few who still took Elijah's calls. "You're making waves," she said. "I'm making a point," he replied. "Yeah, well, it's working. But it's loud. People are talking. Feds are sniffing around. And word is, Monroe's trying to find you off-grid." "I know." She studied him. "You planning to end this?" Elijah sipped his coffee. "It ends when they understand." Quinn raised a brow. "Understand what?" "That the people they hurt aren't weak. Some of us just chose peace first." Later that night, a message to the city. A new video dropped on a private server. It spread like wildfire. It was Elijah, masked in shadow, voice altered. "I am not your enemy," he said. "I'm not anti-police. I'm anti-corruption, anti-abuse, anti-execution without trial." Clips played behind his words, body cam footage of unjustified shootings, lawsuits that vanished, families that mourned with no justice. "I served this country. I protected lives. I took bullets for strangers. But when I came home, you shot my dog like he was trash. You didn't ask. You didn't wait. You just killed." He leaned closer to the camera. "I don't want war. I want truth. And I'll keep burning down your lies until I get it." The screen cut to black. And in bold letters, one line. Elijah Kane is not hiding. He's watching. Inside City Hall, the mayor slammed her hand on the table. "Find him. Now." Her advisors scrambled, calling task forces, demanding surveillance checks, analyzing his digital footprint. But Elijah was a ghost. Every trace was misdirection. Every move was a lesson. He wasn't just fighting Monroe. He was fighting the machine. And somehow, the people were starting to cheer for him. Monroe was unraveling. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Every sound made him jump. Every shadow made him reach for his gun. The precinct was turning cold on him. Nobody said it out loud, but they all knew. His house had been doxxed. His wife took the kids and moved in with her sister. Protesters camped outside his lawn. Elijah hadn't touched him. But Monroe felt destroyed. And that was worse than any bullet. He needed control back. He needed to prove he wasn't prey. So he made a call. Private line, dirty connections. "Yeah, I need someone off the record," Monroe said. "No badge. Just muscle." The voice on the other end was deep. "What's the job?" "I want Elijah Kane dead." A pause. "Then you sure?" Monroe gritted his teeth. "I want his head on my dashboard." 2 nights later, Elijah's safe house perimeter. 3 men moved through the dark like hyenas. Ex-military. Paid mercenaries. Armed with suppressed weapons and thermal vision. They breached silently. But Elijah was already gone. Instead, they found a table. On it, 3 coffee mugs. Warm. Steam still rising. A laptop played video footage, them breaking in from multiple angles. And then Elijah's voice, through speakers hidden in the rafters. "You took the contract. That makes you part of the story now." A red light blinked near their feet. They looked down. Flashbang. The room exploded in white noise. When they recovered, zip ties cut into their wrists, and Elijah's face hovered above them. Calm, unreadable, distant. He didn't speak. He just filmed them. Tied. Helpless. Exposed. Then he left. The next day, social media eruption. A new leak hit every major platform. 3 armed men. Former U.S. contractors. Found bound and gagged in a stolen van outside a children's hospital. Leaked footage showed them entering Elijah's decoy safe house. No words from Elijah this time. Just the footage. And a chilling caption. "I don't need to kill to win. I just need the truth to breathe." Back at the precinct, Monroe smashed his phone against the wall. Daniels watched from a distance. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. The world had turned. And Monroe was no longer feared. He was pitted. Even other officers now whispered, "You brought this on us." Because they knew. Elijah Kane was not backing down. Mayor's office, emergency briefing. The mayor paced. "Get Homeland. Get the feds. I don't care if we need the National Guard. This man is a domestic threat." One advisor raised a hand. "But ma'am, the public sees him as a whistleblower." "Then change the narrative," she snapped. "He's a terrorist. A radical. A danger to law and order." But the truth was, Elijah Kane was redefining law and order. He didn't riot. He didn't kill. He just outsmarted them again and again. And now, a question buzzed across the nation. What if he's right? Elijah lit a single candle in the chapel. Bishop, his dog, lay beside him, bandaged but healing. Alive. He knelt, resting a hand gently on the dog's back. "They tried to bury us, buddy," Elijah whispered. "They didn't know we were seeds." The flame flickered. Somewhere outside, sirens echoed like wolves. But Elijah didn't move. He was ready. And this time, the whole city was watching. A storm was coming. Not rain. Not thunder. Authority. The Department of Homeland Security had arrived. Black SUVs rolled into the city like an invading army. Suits. Earpieces. Portable command centers. They weren't here to talk. They were here to neutralize. Inside, the DHS Mobile Command. Agent Karen Wexler, a counterintelligence veteran, stared at Elijah Kane's profile on the giant monitor. The man had no social media, no traffic tickets, not even a registered phone number. "Why the hell didn't we know about him before now?" she demanded. A junior analyst cleared his throat. How do I say this? He's the ghost we trained to haunt others. Only now he's haunting us." She leaned forward. "No more haunting. We need results. I want eyes on him, ears on the ground. I want to know if he sneezes before he knows he's sick." Monroe watched the news from a motel room like a hunted animal. He hadn't been home in days. His face was on every meme, every protest sign, every nightly debate. He reached for his last bottle of bourbon, empty. Then the burner phone buzzed. A message. One line. "This is your last chance to do something right." Monroe threw the phone. It shattered against the wall. He didn't know why, but those words, those calm, cold words, broke him more than any threat. Because deep down he knew. He was guilty. But he wasn't ready to be forgotten. Elijah, watching the city boil. He moved like vapor through back alleys and rooftops, always one step ahead. Every camera feed DHS tried to tap, he fed them loops. Every heat sensor he misdirected. He knew their playbook. He had written parts of it. But he also knew this couldn't last forever. There was a war for the narrative now. Not just guns or power. Truth was the new weapon. He would use it like a blade. DHS met with the mayor behind closed doors. The decision was made quietly, without press, without permission from the public. A drone strike. On Elijah's signal location. Non-lethal, they said. A message, they claimed. They didn't know Elijah fed them that location on purpose. 10 minutes before the strike, Elijah sat in an abandoned warehouse with a hard drive. Not just files. Evidence. Of years of police cover-ups, sealed settlements, body cam clips never released, whistleblower complaints buried by higher-ups. He'd hacked it all. And now he uploaded it. Live. A single link. thecanefiles.org. The site spread like wildfire. Clicks skyrocketed. Screenshots. Names. Video proof. Audio logs. The entire machine laid bare for the world. Then the explosion. A thunderous blast rocked the decoy warehouse. News headlines screamed. Breaking. Government strikes at vigilante hacker suspected of terror activity. But Elijah wasn't inside. He stood across the street, disguised as a homeless vet, watching the flames rise. Next to him, Bishop whined softly, sensing the tension. Elijah knelt, rubbing behind his ears. Now we see what they do when the mask is off. The Kane files were everywhere. Downloaded. mirrored, backed up 100,000 times in hours. You couldn't delete the truth anymore. The world had it. And more importantly, they believed it. Back at the DHS command center, Agent Wexler slammed her laptop shut. He played us. The analyst nodded, pale-faced. He made us strike while everyone was watching. Turned us into the enemy. She stood slowly. Then we stopped thinking like agents. The room turned to her. We think like soldiers. Because this man, this soldier, he's not just a hacker. He's an insurgent. He's a strategist. He's a movement. Elijah's voice in a final broadcast. He appeared on every major platform that would allow it. Unmasked. Face calm. Voice clear. I didn't come to burn your system. I came to show you it was already on fire. And now you know. He looked straight into the lens. And if anything happens to me, more files drop. You can't erase truth. You can only decide what side you're on when it comes. The screen faded to black. Night fell gently over the hills outside the city. Elijah stood on a cliffside with Bishop by his side, both of them silhouettes against the moon. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He just watched the city flicker below him, angry, scared, alive. You're safe now, he whispered to Bishop. And with that, they turned, disappearing into the darkness. The fire Elijah sparked had become a wildfire. Across the nation, people poured into the streets. Not in rage, but in purpose. They weren't looting. They weren't burning. They were holding up signs that read, "Truth is a weapon." We are all Elijah Kane. Protect the people, not the system. Protests took root in front of precincts, city halls, and courthouses. College students, veterans, teachers, clergy, they all came. Some with fists, some with tears, all with questions. And one demand: accountability. But something darker lurked in the shadows. In a dim garage in Baton Rouge, a young man stared at Elijah's video over and over. He wore a hoodie, black gloves. On his wall were printed screenshots from the Kane files. But he wasn't here to protest. He wanted vengeance. This is how we fight back, he whispered to himself. This is how we make them pay. He wasn't Elijah Kane. He was the dangerous echo Elijah never wanted. Meanwhile, Elijah, in hiding. He stayed on the move, hopping safe houses, switching vehicles, cloaking his digital presence like a second skin. Bishop was healing, still limping, but stronger every day. But Elijah was restless. He didn't fear capture. He feared what came next. The movement was no longer his alone. It was growing without him. It was mutating. I never asked to be a symbol, he said one night to Captain Quinn, who had just smuggled him another burner laptop. Quinn sipped her whiskey. That's not how symbols work. The world picks M. And right now they picked you. Elijah looked away. Then maybe I need to disappear. She raised an eyebrow. And do what? Let the rage take your place. Back in Baton Rouge, the copycat, a 24-year-old named Marcus Riddick, launched a live stream titled, "Kane's Army, No More Peace." In it, he held up a Glock and announced plans to ambush officers responsible for past abuse. He claimed he was finishing the mission Kane started. And that's when Elijah knew. He had to act. Using his old Delta contacts and Quinn's backdoor access to DHS surveillance, Elijah tracked Marcus down within hours. He arrived at the garage alone. No mask. No tricks. Marcus spun around, startled. "Yo, it's you," he shouted, eyes lighting up. "Elijah F*****ing Kane." Elijah cut him off, voice calm but sharp. "You're not helping us. You're poisoning this." Marcus laughed nervously. "No, man, I'm doing what you couldn't. You pull punches. I'm swinging." Elijah stepped forward. "And when you kill someone, when their kid grows up without a parent, when that footage gets twisted, and the message becomes Elijah Kane inspired a killer, you think that's a win?" Marcus hesitated. "I just wanted justice." "You wanted revenge," Elijah said coldly. "Justice is slow. Revenge is loud. But only one of them leaves something behind that matters." Marcus looked down at the gun. He didn't drop it. Elijah's voice softened. "Don't become what they already think we are. Long silence. Then the gun clattered to the floor. Back at DHS command, Agent Wexler watched the stream with narrowed eyes. The garage had been bugged. She turned to her team. Still think he's a terrorist? Nobody answered. That night, Elijah's final broadcast. He appeared again, but this time he looked tired. Older. Some people think this movement is mine. But it's not. It's yours. It always was. I was a soldier because I believed in something. That belief didn't die when my dog was shot. It woke up. He paused. But make no mistake, this is not a war for revenge. It's a call for change. Don't let rage rewrite the mission. The screen faded to black. And for the first time, Elijah signed off with a name. Elijah Kane. The nation kept marching. Laws began to shift. Cases reopened. Indictments filed. The system didn't crumble. It bent. Not out of fear. Out of exposure. And somewhere beneath open sky and stars, a man walked with his dog, silent, free, untraceable. Watching. Always watching. Because justice was a journey. And Elijah Kane was still on the road. A new storm was brewing. Elijah had gone quiet after his last broadcast, slipping into the shadows once more. But in his absence, something unexpected arrived. An encrypted email. No subject line. Just a video attachment labeled Project Damascus, classified. He clicked play. The footage was grainy. A black site. Somewhere off-grid. Uniformed men, some in badges, others in military fatigues, escorting prisoners into soundproof rooms. One face stopped Elijah cold. Monroe, leaning against a wall, overseeing it all. Another face appeared moments later. Agent Wexler. Elijah paused the video. This wasn't about racism anymore. This wasn't just about one dog. Or even one city. This was systemic. It was a covert operation run by a fusion of corrupt law enforcement and rogue military contractors. And they were experimenting on detainees. Tactical stress tests, a voice in the footage explained. Break them. Then build them. Then use them. Later that night, Elijah meets Quinn again. He handed her a drive. What's this? She asked. Proof that everything we've done so far was just scratching the surface. She plugged it into her laptop. Watched 5 minutes of the footage. Then closed the screen and leaned back slowly, her expression hollow. My God. Quinn explained what little she knew. After September 11th, a few private defense firms got massive contracts to interrogate and recondition high-risk suspects. When the war dried up, they turned their eyes home. They needed a new enemy, she added grimly. They found it in the streets. In protesters. In so-called radicals. Mostly black, mostly poor. Elijah's jaw clenched. Monroe was never just a bad cop, he muttered. He was trained to become one. Meanwhile, inside a hidden black site, Monroe sat at a long table, flanked by military brass and high-ranking law enforcement. We need to shut him down permanently, one suit said. Wexler shook her head. No, we need to discredit him. A martyr becomes a myth. But a fraud? That dies in silence. They nodded in agreement. A plan was forming. Frame Elijah Kane for domestic terrorism. Forge evidence. Fake a plot. Pin it all on him. And when it was over, make the world beg for his execution. Elijah's next move. He stared out the warehouse window, Bishop at his side. They're trying to turn me into what they fear. Quinn stood beside him. And if they succeed? He looked at her, voice steady. Then we take the war to them. She hesitated. You're talking about going public again? Elijah nodded. No masks. No voice mod. Just me. But they'll kill you. He didn't blink. Maybe. But they'll never kill the truth. A broadcast begins. Elijah Kane. Full face. Full name. No encryption. Behind him, a wall covered in documents, maps, footage. He speaks, calm and clear. I was a soldier trained to protect my country. But somewhere along the way, my country turned its weapons inward. I have seen what you're not supposed to see. And I'm going to show you all of it. He pauses. Then says the one phrase that echoes around the world. Welcome to Project Damascus. Elijah Cain had declared war. Not with bullets. Not with bombs. With truth. The Project Damascus broadcast exploded across the globe. Within 12 hours, hashtags flooded social media. Hashtag Damascus exposed. Hashtag Cain was right. Hashtag shut it down. Mainstream media tried to downplay it. Politicians called it a hoax. But the people? They believed him. Because the footage was real. Because deep down, they'd suspected this all along. The elite strike back. The men in the black site weren't just worried. They were panicking. Elijah hadn't just exposed a program. He'd exposed a cartel, a private ecosystem of power where money, war, and fear kept the machine running. And now the world was watching. He has to be erased, one general said. This time, no subtlety, just results. They deployed Unit Omega, a 6-man kill team. Former Tier 1 operators. Ruthless. Surgical. And the one message they were given. Bring us his head. Meanwhile, Elijah prepares for his last mission. He sat in silence, gear laid out before him like a shrine. Kevlar vest. Modified SCAR rifle. Combat knife. Tracer drones. Signal jammers. And an old Delta Force patch tucked inside his shirt. Quinn stood by the door, arms crossed. You're seriously going in? To the black site. Tonight. She shook her head. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and globally hunted. Elijah looked up calm. I've been worse off. Later that night, the ambush. Elijah and Bishop were traveling through a wooded back road in West Virginia when the attack hit. First, an EMP. His Jeep died instantly. Lights out. Engine down. Then, silence. Then, the hiss of boots on gravel. Unit Omega was here. They came fast. But Elijah came faster. He launched a drone flare, blinding the tree line. Bishop leapt from the vehicle, attacking one of the men before disappearing into the woods. Then came the chaos. Gunfire. Smoke. Bodies hitting dirt. Elijah moved like a shadow, using the forest to his advantage. One by one, the operators fell. But one of them, Operator 6, was different. Silent. Methodical. He and Elijah met hand-to-hand in the clearing. It wasn't a fight. It was a war of skill. Brutal punches. Takedowns. Knife glints. But Elijah gained the upper hand. He slammed the man down, blade to throat. Who sent you? He demanded. The man smiled, blood in his teeth. Everyone. Aftermath of the ambush. Elijah stood over the bodies, breathing hard. Not a scratch on him. Bishop returned, panting but alive. They shared a silent look. Then Elijah picked up a fallen radio and sent a single message. Omega neutralized. Tell Monroe I'm coming home. Tucked deep in an abandoned Cold War bunker near the Appalachian border, Black Site Sentinel was more fortress than prison. Armed guards. Turret drones. Facial scans. No one had ever broken in. No one had ever broken out. But Elijah Cain wasn't just anyone. With Quinn feeding him remote intel and a stolen access card from one of the operators, he made his move. Cutting through darkness. Ducking sensors. Disabling turrets. He moved with purpose. Inside, the halls echoed with distant screams. Cells. Experiments. Control rooms full of surveillance feeds. He saw it all. And then he saw her. Locked in a secured room, behind reinforced glass, was a woman. Angela Cain, his sister. Missing for years. Presumed dead. Only she wasn't dead. She was part of the Project Damascus prototype. Trained. Tortured. Conditioned. Then discarded when she resisted. Elijah stared, frozen. His voice cracked for the first time in years. Angela? Her head lifted. Slowly. Recognition. Tears. And then something else. Fury. Elijah, she whispered. Then, louder. You came. Footsteps echoed behind him. Monroe's voice filled the hallway. I was hoping you'd come here. Elijah turned, eyes burning. Monroe stepped forward, armed, smirking. Now we finish what we started. And just like that, the room was thick with tension. Elijah's eyes locked with Monroe's. It wasn't just a fight. It wasn't just about survival. It was about everything. Elijah's breath was steady, his mind calculating the next move. Monroe wasn't just a man in front of him. He was a symbol of corruption, of everything that had gone wrong in this system. Where is she? Elijah's voice was low cold. Monroe smiled. You'll get to her. Eventually. But first, let's talk about you. He stepped forward, weapon in hand. The final confrontation was inevitable. Angela Kane, in the glass cell, was no longer passive. Her hand gripped the glass. She stared at the scene unfolding. And in that moment, everything clicked for her. This wasn't the world she had been trained to fight for. She had been manipulated, controlled. But this, seeing her brother, this was different. The fight begins. Monroe raised his gun. Before he could fire, Elijah was already moving, fast. He dove behind a steel column, barely avoiding the barrage of bullets. The firefight that followed was brutal. The sound of gunfire echoed through the hall, like thunder. Metal clanged as bullets ricocheted. Sparks flew. Monroe had the advantage of position. But Elijah had something Monroe didn't. Years of warfare under his belt. Every move was calculated. Every step a strategy. Elijah moved, dodging bullets, using his environment to disarm Monroe's men one by one. The lights flickered as the sound of their bodies, crashing, echoed throughout the hallway. Monroe cursed under his breath. He wasn't just trying to kill Elijah. He was trying to break him. The final confrontation between the two men was a clash of titans. Elijah, calm, methodical. Monroe, ruthless, enraged. Elijah reached for a nearby pipe, swinging it at Monroe, knocking the weapon from his hands. Monroe retaliated, charging Elijah. But the moment was over before it began. With a sharp, controlled twist, Elijah disarmed Monroe, slamming him to the ground. But there was no victory in the moment. Elijah stared down at him. You were never in charge. This whole thing, this was never yours. Monroe snarled, spitting blood. You think you've won? You think you've stopped this? I already have, Elijah said, his voice full of conviction. From her cage, Angela shouted. Elijah, stop. He froze, turning to face her. His sister. Standing there, not as a victim, but as a warrior. Elijah, don't kill him, she pleaded. We don't need to become them. Monroe, still on the floor, laughed weakly. Too late for that. But Angela was right. Elijah's weapon remained steady in his grip, but he was fighting something deeper than Monroe now. He was fighting the need for vengeance. With a sharp intake of breath, Elijah lowered his gun. Monroe laughed again, struggling to his feet. You can't just walk away from this, Kane. You can't walk away from what's coming next. But Elijah didn't flinch. He didn't need to answer. The room shook. A loud, echoing sound reverberated from deep within the building. Wires sparked. Systems crashed. The base was starting to implode. Bishop, unseen but always present, had triggered the fail-safe detonation of the core. You're running out of time, Elijah said to Monroe, his voice unbothered, as the sound of the countdown echoed louder. Monroe's eyes widened in panic. You're insane. You'll all die. Elijah just smiled. I'm already dead. You don't get it, do you? You're the one who's been living in the wrong system. The walls of the black site started to groan as the internal systems began to shut down. Lights flickered again. Alarms screamed. Elijah turned to Angela. We need to move. Now. She nodded, her eyes full of understanding. She'd seen what Elijah was capable of. But now she saw something else. She followed him. The last few yards were a blur. The facility was disintegrating around them as they moved fast, through collapsing hallways, down stairwells, and out into the dark night. The team was ready. Bishop, Quinn, and the backup he called in. The world outside was quiet. No more gunfire. No more violence. Just the aftermath. After the collapse, the media storm was inevitable. The world was finally learning the truth about Project Damascus, about the systematic abuse, the corrupt alliances between military contractors and law enforcement, the hidden experiments. Everything was coming to light. It wasn't just a win for Elijah Kane. It was a win for everyone who'd ever been pushed down, erased, forgotten. Elijah sat in a makeshift office, his face tired but resolute, watching the global reaction unfold. The world had changed. But it wasn't over. The battle was still out there. But Elijah knew he didn't have to face it alone anymore. Weeks passed. The fallout continued. People were arrested. The government was forced to hold hearings. Monroe was locked away, but not without a message of his own. He smiled, waiting for the end. "There's always another one," he whispered to himself. "Another game, another pawn to play." But for now, the world had seen the truth. And for Elijah Kane, that was enough. The world had changed. But for Elijah Kane, nothing had truly ended. He had brought down Project Damascus, exposed the network of corruption that had run deep within the military-industrial complex, and freed his sister, Angela. But there were more shadows lurking, far beyond the borders of the United States. And those shadows had begun to take notice of him. It came in the dead of night, an encrypted message. As usual, no subject line, just the words. "We need you, Kane. The job's bigger than before. Worldwide. We're going to stop them all." Elijah didn't need to ask who it was. It was Quinn. He'd grown used to the urgency in her voice, the quiet resolve behind her words. She had become more than just an ally. She was part of the new mission, a crucial piece of the puzzle. He rubbed his face, tired but resolute. They had shut down one black site. But there were more. There were networks. Across continents. And they were growing. The global threat was real. Elijah had been to hell and back. He'd survived assassins, covert ops, and brutal betrayals. But now, it was about something bigger. Something with a deeper, more dangerous reach. Elijah called Angela, who had begun to reclaim her life after the trauma of Project Damascus. She was recovering, learning how to trust again, how to reconnect with the world. But when she heard Elijah's voice on the other end, she didn't hesitate. "I'm in," she said. Her words echoed with finality. It wasn't just about stopping one organization. It was about bringing down an entire global network of covert military operations that had turned into a monster. Elijah knew what they had to do. A plan comes together. Elijah, Quinn, Bishop, and Angela sat around a small table. The world map spread out before them. Quinn had gathered intel. Another shadow operation had surfaced, this time on the other side of the world, operating in Central Africa. "We're dealing with something different here," Quinn said, pointing to a region in Sudan on the map. A private military corporation operating as peacekeepers, but they're funding their operations through illicit resources. Human trafficking, arms smuggling, the works. Elijah leaned in, eyes narrowing. "How do we break them?" "They have the same operational structure as Project Damascus," Quinn explained. "We infiltrate, break the foundation, and expose their leaders. But it's going to be tougher this time. We're dealing with military-grade mercenaries and covert intelligence units." Elijah stood, his body tense, his mind already moving. "So we hit them hard, fast, and public." Within days, they were on the move. It was time for a full-scale infiltration, and this time there would be no mask, no deception. Elijah Kane was walking straight into the lion's den. They parachuted into the heart of Sudan under the cover of darkness. The air was thick with heat and tension. There was no room for error. The operation was split into 3 phases: gather intel, disable their operations, and expose them to the world. This wasn't just another raid. This was a global call for justice. Elijah, Quinn, Bishop, and Angela split into small units as they made their way through the dense jungle. They navigated through narrow paths and underbrush, careful not to alert the compound's guards. Elijah was on the front lines, using his unmatched skills to disable security systems and sneak past enemy forces. His years as a Delta Force commander had made him a master of stealth. Every movement was precise, calculated. Angela, using her training from Project Damascus, was no longer the passive participant she once was. She had grown into her role, cutting through the jungle with purpose and strength. Bishop, ever the silent watcher, stayed close, covering their backs. Quinn worked in the background, hacking into systems to gain access to confidential data, sending real-time intel to Elijah and the team. Her sharp mind was their secret weapon. As the team infiltrated deeper into the compound, they discovered a chilling truth. The operation wasn't just about smuggling weapons. It was human experimentation on a scale far worse than Project Damascus. In hidden rooms, they found dossiers on prisoners, men, women, children, being used as test subjects for various operations. Elijah's blood ran cold. This was no longer just about justice. This was humanity's darkest corner, and he would bring it to light. Suddenly, a security alarm blared. The compound had detected them. Monsters disguised as mercenaries rushed in from every direction. Elijah and his team fought back fiercely. The air was filled with the sound of gunfire, grenades exploding in the distance. Elijah moved like a storm, disarming, dismantling, and taking out anyone who stood in his way. He fought through the compound, his eyes set on the head of the operation, the man who ran everything. In a small, fortified office, the leader of the mercenary force stood before a glass desk, watching the chaos unfold on screens. Elijah entered, his eyes locked onto the man. "You think you can stop me?" the leader sneered. Elijah smiled grimly. "I already have." He launched himself across the room, taking down the mercenary leader with one swift move. His fist slammed into the man's throat, cutting off any further speech. As the leader crumpled to the ground, Elijah spoke into a nearby microphone, broadcasting to every corner of the world. "This ends tonight. For all of you." By the time the sun rose over the Sudanese landscape, the mercenary operation was dismantled. The survivors were captured. Their files leaked to the media. The truth was out. Elijah Cain had struck again, but this time it was the world that felt the weight of his vengeance. The global network had been torn apart, and those responsible were now on the run. Elijah stood alone on the edge of a cliff, overlooking the vast landscape. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. There would be more black sites, more corrupt operations, more people to expose. But Elijah Cain wasn't afraid, because he knew that no matter the size of the enemy, the world had one weapon that could never be silenced: the truth. The world was still reeling from the revelations Elijah Cain had brought to light. News outlets were flooded with footage, documents, and testimonies from those who had survived the hellish experiments. There was no going back now. The global network of covert operations, built on the exploitation of human lives, was in full collapse. But even as the world watched, Elijah knew this wasn't the end. Not yet. The powerful were always quick to rebuild. They had resources, connections, and a deep well of secrecy to draw from. That's why Elijah Cain's fight had to continue. It was a war that had no end. Not until the last corrupt power was brought to justice. Weeks after the collapse of the mercenary operation in Sudan, Elijah found himself back in a small, dimly lit room with Quinn and the team. The atmosphere was heavy, but not just from exhaustion. It was the weight of the truth they were carrying. Quinn paced the room, going over new intel she had gathered. "They're regrouping," she said, tapping the data pad in her hands. "There's a new player in the game, someone high up. We haven't identified them yet, but we know one thing. They've been funding the covert operations we've taken down. They're untouchable for now." Elijah frowned. "Who is it?" Quinn pointed to a map, zooming in on various locations. "They're operating out of multiple countries, ruthless political figures, corporate CEOs, and even people within the intelligence agencies. This isn't just one organization anymore. It's an international syndicate with a web of influence too vast for any one government to handle." Elijah's hands tightened into fists. If they're untouchable now, they won't be for long. Angela and Bishop stood by, listening intently. The stakes were higher now. The mission wasn't just about taking down one rogue operation. It was about dismantling an entire global network that operated in the shadows of the world's most powerful systems. "Their influence stretches from the U.S. to Europe, Africa, Asia," Quinn continued, scrolling through encrypted files. They control industries, politicians, military contractors. They've infiltrated governments. And their ultimate goal is to maintain the status quo, control, power, profit. Elijah's eyes darkened. And what happens to those who stand in their way? They disappear, Quinn answered grimly. Bishop's voice cut through the tension. So what's the plan? Elijah turned toward the team. We find them. We expose them. And we take them down. Elijah's team set off on a worldwide manhunt, targeting individuals with connections to the Shadow Syndicate. They traveled across continents, South America, the Middle East, Europe, Asia, wherever the network had roots. They infiltrated private organizations, corporations, and political figures, extracting key pieces of intel. Every lead was dangerous. Every step brought them closer to the heart of the beast. They uncovered bank accounts with millions in illicit funds. They found hidden documents in government archives. They tracked military movements to secret bases where covert operations were still ongoing, even after Project Damascus and Sudan had fallen. But the deeper they dug, the more elusive the syndicate became. In Berlin, they encountered their first major obstacle. A high-ranking official within the European Union had connections to the network. Elijah, Quinn, and Bishop went undercover, posing as international investors in a shady deal, hoping to extract information from the corrupt bureaucrat. The night of the meeting was tense. The room was thick with the smell of cigar smoke and hidden agendas. Elijah leaned back in his chair, studying the man across the table. "Do you know who you're dealing with?" the official asked, his voice low and laced with threat. "I know exactly who you are," Elijah replied coldly. "But it's you who doesn't know who you're dealing with." Elijah had been trained to read people, and this man's unease was palpable. It didn't take long for the official to slip, revealing crucial names and locations connected to the network. They extracted the intel and left the building as the shadows of the city grew darker. Back at their safe house, Quinn worked tirelessly to decrypt the new data. Elijah watched from across the room, his mind already racing ahead. "There's someone at the top of this," Quinn said, her voice tight. "Someone pulling the strings. We have the name now, but it's just one more piece." The name was Ezekiel Lyle, a shadowy figure who had somehow avoided detection for years. He had been a former CIA operative, a man with connections everywhere, business, government, and military. If they could find Lyle, they could find the heart of the syndicate. Lyle's last known location was traced to a private estate in Switzerland. The mansion was heavily guarded, surrounded by armed men, automated drones, and a security system so advanced it would make even the most seasoned hackers hesitate. But Elijah wasn't hesitant. The team launched a full-scale assault. The mission was simple: find Lyle, extract him, and make him talk. They breached the compound in the dead of night, moving swiftly, silently, through the snow-covered landscape. Every guard was neutralized. Every system was hacked. As they reached Lyle's office, Elijah kicked open the door, weapon raised. Lyle sat there, calmly sipping his drink, as if waiting for them. "Well, well," Lyle said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "You've made it far, Elijah. But you're too late." "We'll see about that," Elijah answered. The final showdown was explosive. Lyle was no ordinary man. He was a former operative, well-versed in combat and espionage. He had resources at his disposal, but he underestimated one thing: Elijah Kane's relentlessness. It was a battle of wits and skill. Elijah moved with the precision of a man who had fought wars for decades. Lyle, however, had grown complacent, surrounded by his wealth, his power, his connections. The fight didn't last long. Elijah disarmed Lyle, forcing him to the ground. "You're finished," Elijah said, breathing heavily. "This ends now." Lyle laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You think this will stop anything? I'm just one piece of the puzzle. You can kill me, but the machine goes on." But Elijah wasn't listening anymore. He didn't need to. He had Lyle. He had the information to expose the entire syndicate. With Lyle in custody, the team broadcast the final piece of evidence to the world. Ezekiel Lyle's name was linked to politicians, corporations, and private military operations all over the globe. The fallout was swift. Global leaders were forced to address the corruption within their own governments. Laws were passed. Investigations began. But Elijah knew this was only one battle won. The fight against power, corruption, and greed would never truly end. And for him, that meant the mission continued. But for now, the world knew one thing for certain. Elijah Cain was still out there, and he wasn't done yet.